There are many ways to open files in Vim. Different ones are appropriate for different situations, and writing about them doesn't really convey what they're like to use. So this video is going to provide a quick walkthrough of your options. Details on each are provided in the Vim.Works post on opening files that you'll find linked below. So let's start from the outside in. I'm going to be using Mac Vim, so I'll be typing mvim. If I was on Linux, I'd type gvim for GNOME Vim. And you can, of course, use plain old Vim anywhere you want to launch the terminal version. The first step is to cd to the root of the project you intend to work in. If you're just going to open one random file that isn't part of a project, you don't have to bother cding to its directory. For example, if you wanted to just make a quick change to your Vim.RC while working on something for your day job. You want to get in the habit of cding to the root of your project because it's going to make that the starting point of all the future files that you open from within your Vim session. So they'll be a lot easier to find. Basically, you're setting yourself up for success. So let's cd to the root of my project. And open a file in it. Now, if we ask Vim what directory we're in, it'll say the root of our project. Ta-da! Next up is Command-O. Now that we're inside of Vim, Command-O is the first way to open files, and probably the easiest for new people, because that's how you open files in every other app. And when I use Command-O, you can see that it defaults to that directory, the one at the root of my project. I assume that Control-O on a Linux box is the same. I would note that you can navigate this window without reaching for the mouse. When you choose a file, just hit Enter, and it'll open in a new tab. Just in case this isn't obvious, this won't work when you're running in a Vim terminal, because Command-O is handled by the terminal app, not the things running in it. Next up, we have Edit, which I use about 50% of the time. Note that because Vim is well integrated into the shell, I was able to use tab completion and type S tab R tab enter instead of the full path to the file. Next up, Netrw. If you're coming from Atom or Sublime or pretty much any modern editor, there's probably a good chance you like navigating with a directory tree down the side. That's where Netrw comes in. I'm pretty sure Netrw stands for Network Read Write because it lets you read and write files over a network, but I can't actually find any documentation to confirm that meaning. Anyway, I'm not going to cover remote editing in this video because it's a topic unto itself. For now, I'm going to focus on emulating the behavior of editors like Atom. First, I'm going to invoke it in a vertical split with :V explore. V-explore is a bit much to type, so you can say :vex instead. You can just think of how vexing it is that there are so many ways to invoke everything in Vim. To close it, you just quit, like any other window. Instead of typing V-explore for something you're probably going to do rather often, you can add a function like the one I mentioned in the opening files post on Vim.Works to toggle it with Control-E. Now, before we go any further, I have to admit that I've cheated a little. By default, Netrw has a big banner of ugliness across the top, which I've hidden. It includes instructions and other things that you're going to completely ignore. I've pre-configured it to hide that and set a specific list style and more. Hopefully, you can forgive me and find the details on how to do it yourself in the post. As you can see, Netrw gives you a nice tree view of your project. It starts with a view of the current directory, but your cursor also starts on the ... which in Unix means go up a directory. So if you want to go up, just hit Enter. And that's the key to using Netrw. Move your cursor onto something and hit Enter, or even click around with your mouse to open and close folders and files. You navigate in Netrw just like any other file, HJKL, arrow keys, searching, whatever. Find something, put your cursor on it, whack Enter to open it. If it's a folder, it'll toggle it open or closed. Or you can even use your mouse to do the same thing. If it's a file, it'll open it and move your cursor into it. To close it, you just put your cursor back into the tree view. Either click or type Ctrl+WW, which is Vim's way for moving between different splits, and enter the standard :Q to quit. You can also open it as a horizontal split with Hexplore. It works exactly the same way. The shorter version is hex, with a capital, of course. Or you can have it take over the entire viewport with just :Explore or :EX. There is a minor gotcha with doing it this way. You can't just quit out of it without choosing anything. I almost never use :Explore, but when I do and I decide that I didn't want to change my file, I'll just switch to my buffers list and choose it from there. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention NERDTree, not because I particularly recommend it, but because it's just a matter of time before you see it mentioned if you haven't already. NERDTree is basically the same thing, except Enter doesn't work, and you can type ? to toggle to help. It's got some options for opening things in a split or not, which NetRW can do. To its credit, NERDTree does make it easy to sometimes open in a split and sometimes open in the original window. Personally, I tend to open things only one way, so I don't really care about this on-the-fly flexibility, and I don't want to have to load additional plugin code into memory when I don't really need it. O opens a file, and then you can Ctrl+WW to get back. You can Tab to open a file in a different split. Overall, I prefer the simplicity of NetRW and whacking Enter to open over toggling things. Closing the NERDTree window is slightly easier in that you can just type Q without the preceding : or trailing Enter. Overall, I just prefer the simplicity of NetRW and whacking Enter to open or toggle things. Next up is Control-P. Control-P is awesome. Before I said that 50% of the time I use :edit, while the other 50% of the time I use Control-P. It's a plugin that you'll have to install, but it's definitely worth it. What's cool about it is that it uses fuzzy matching to let you quickly find and open a file, even when you don't know where it is exactly. In this case, I know there's a file named lifecyclehooks.test.cr somewhere in this project, but I don't know where. So here's how I'd find it with Control-P. When I open it, it'll start out with a list of all possible files in the project, and I can arrow through them, but watch what happens as I start typing in the name. It will gradually narrow down the list of possible matches, and it will do it while ignoring case. Once I found the file I want, I just hit Enter to open it. If I was just checking the name of some file, I could hit Escape instead to exit it without opening anything new. Now, I want to show you what I meant about fuzzy matching. If I type rep in this project, I'm going to get an interesting result. Notice that the first option doesn't have rep anywhere in the file name, but if you look at the full thing that's being displayed, you'll see what it's doing. It found a file in the path that included an R that had an E somewhere after it and a P somewhere after that. This is useful when you're dealing with projects with a really deeply nested file structure. You can just type some of the letters of some of the directories above it to narrow down the search. Also, I can move my cursor within the text I've typed to add something earlier on in the string. You can use arrow keys or Control-A, Control-E, just like on the command line. Now, I've been typing slowly while demonstrating this so you could see what it's doing, but it's actually very responsive even on large projects. The first load does take a second more. I'll do the first search for lifecyclehooks.cr again at full speed so that you can see. But first I'll need to open a different file, because Control-P excludes the file you're currently viewing as part of the results. Because why would you want to go there? Those are all the major ways of opening files in Vim. If you'd like to see more posts like this, then help support Vim.Works on Patreon at patreon.com/Vim.Works.